Watch your yard at dusk. Really watch it. There is a moment, and if you have been paying attention, you already know the one, where everything shifts. The house finch that was working the feeder 10 minutes ago is gone. The pair of mourning doves that spent the whole afternoon on your patio rail have vanished. The white-throated sparrow that was scratching through the leaf litter under your shrubs, gone. You did not see any of them leave. One moment, the yard was alive. The next, it looked like a photograph of a yard. The shape of the place without any of the life that fills it. Most people walk away from the window at this point. They assume the birds are somewhere nearby, doing something vague and bird-like in the growing dark. They do not think much more about it. That is a mistake. Because what your birds are about to do, right now, in the hour after you stop watching, is some of the most extraordinary behavior they will perform all day. And almost none of it happens where you can see it. Welcome back to Pure Homestead. If you are new here, this channel is about what is actually happening in your backyard. Not just the easy stuff you can see, but the biology underneath it. The behaviors running constantly just outside the edge of your awareness. Subscribe before we get into this, because what I am about to show you happens in your yard every single night. And once you know it, you will never look at a dark, quiet yard the same way again. Tonight, we are going where the birds go. Into the dark. Into the hours between dusk and the first light. We are going to cover 5 things that happen to your backyard birds every single night. And I want you to stay until number 5, because what I am going to tell you about the night sky above your house is the kind of thing that genuinely stops people mid-sentence when they hear it for the first time. Let's go. The first thing to understand is that your birds do not wander when the light drops. They go somewhere specific, a deliberate, chosen location they return to night after night with the same reliability you return to your own bed. Take the house sparrow, a bird so familiar most people do not even register it anymore. You know where it spends the day: the feeder, the bush by the front door, the gap in the eave above the garage. What you probably do not know is that it has a roost site within roughly 300 feet of all of those spots, and it has been using that exact location every night for weeks. House sparrows prefer dense ivy, thick evergreen shrubs, the protected interior of a conifer, anywhere the canopy closes in tight enough that wind and predators both have trouble getting through. If you have a dense juniper or a climbing vine against a wall anywhere near your house, there is a real possibility that sparrows have been sleeping there every night without you noticing. The dark-eyed junco takes a different approach. Juncos roost low, often on or near the ground, pressed against the base of a shrub or under the overhang of dense brush. In snowy conditions, some juncos will roost inside a snow cavity, a hollow where the snow has drifted against a log or a shrub base, using the insulating properties of packed snow the same way a sleeping bag works. The snow traps a layer of air against the bird's body and holds it there. Outside the snow cavity, temperatures might be dropping towards 0. Inside, pressed against packed snow, a junco can maintain a survivable microclimate with nothing but its own body heat and the physics of insulation. The downy woodpecker has the most reliable address of all. At dusk, it moves to a roosting cavity, a hole it has excavated specifically for sleeping, separate from any nest cavity it uses for breeding. Downy woodpeckers will spend weeks carving out a roost hole in a dead branch or a soft wooded snag, a space just large enough for one bird, sealed almost entirely by the bird's own body when it backs inside. The opening faces downward in many cases, which makes it harder for a predator to reach in. A sleeping downy inside its roost cavity is so well concealed that you could walk past it in daylight and never know the bird was there. Your yard is full of these precise, deliberate addresses. The birds know where they are going. You just have not been invited. Here is the situation your birds are facing every night, and most people have no idea how severe it is. A small bird, a chickadee, a wren, a sparrow, burns calories to generate body heat the way a furnace burns fuel. The smaller the bird, the higher its surface area to volume ratio, and the faster heat bleeds away into the air around it. On a cold night, the energy cost of keeping warm is enormous relative to the bird's size. A bird that does not solve this problem correctly will not survive to morning. The solution most backyard birds use is a behavior called regulated torpor, a deliberate, controlled drop in body temperature that cuts the heating bill dramatically. This is not like a human getting cold. This is the bird actively dialing down its own thermostat, dropping its core temperature by 10, 15, even 20 degrees below its daytime level, slowing its heart rate, pulling its metabolism back to the absolute minimum required to stay alive. It is the avian equivalent of turning off every light in the house except one. The house wren, weighing less than half an ounce, enters this state on cold nights and burns as little as half the energy it would otherwise need to survive until dawn. Half. On a winter night where the difference between surviving and not surviving is whether you have enough fat reserves left at first light, that is not a minor adjustment. That is the entire equation. What this means for your yard is more direct than most people realize. Every fat source you provide in winter, suet, black oil sunflower seeds, peanuts, Niger, is not a supplement. It is fuel for a physiological process your birds need to perform every single night. The bird that ate from your suet cage at 4 in the afternoon and the bird that wakes up alive in your yard at 7 in the morning are the same bird. What happened in between involved that fuel and a set of physiological controls so precise they still surprise the researchers who study them. Here is something worth sitting with. At midnight, your yard looks empty. Dark, still, nothing moving. You look out your window and see nothing. But your yard at midnight is not empty. It is full of birds in a state of active, distributed awareness. Hidden in cavities and dense shrubs, and the tight inner branches of your evergreens. And every one of them is monitoring the night. Many birds practice what researchers call unihemispheric sleep. Sleep in which one half of the brain enters a rest state while the other stays active. One eye closes, the other stays open, scanning. The hemispheres rotate, so both sides eventually get rest. But the bird is never fully, deeply unconscious, the way a sleeping human is. It is running in a kind of low-power alert mode, similar to the way your phone screen dims, but does not fully shut off. This matters because your yard at night is not silent. The great horned owl, calling from the oak tree at the back of the property at 10 p.m., is being registered by every roosting bird within hearing distance. The sudden alarm call of a robin flushed off a branch by a passing cat travels through the dark and lands on a dozen sleeping birds as immediate, useful information. A raccoon moving along the fence line. A fox crossing the lawn. These are not unseen events. The birds in your yard are tracking them. Your yard at midnight has a sensory network running through it. Birds in cavities, birds in dense shrubs, birds tucked into the angles of tree branches, all of them processing the night, all of them ready to move in a fraction of a second if the information coming through that open eye tells them something has changed. It looks like stillness. It is the opposite of stillness. Most people's mental model of nighttime in the yard is simple. The daytime birds are asleep. The owls are awake. And that is the division. Clean, intuitive, wrong. The northern mockingbird does not observe this schedule. Mockingbirds are famous for their daytime song. The relentless, varied, borrowing from everything performance that can go on for hours. What is less famous is that an unmated male mockingbird will sing through the night. Not occasionally, not briefly. Through the night. Full song at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., under a streetlight or a full moon, for hours at a time. Because artificial light and moonlight both trigger the hormonal systems that drive singing. If you live anywhere near a lit suburban street, and you have heard what sounded like birdsong in the middle of the night, and assumed you were imagining it, you almost certainly were not. The common nighthawk is a case most backyard watchers miss entirely, because it is easy to overlook at dusk. Nighthawks are aerial insectivores, birds built to catch moths and beetles and other night-flying insects on the wing. They look at first glance like a swallow or a small falcon, erratic in flight, appearing at dusk over suburban areas in late summer in numbers that can be surprising if you know to look. While your finches and sparrows are settling in for the night, the nighthawks are just getting started, working the airspace above your house in the low light, catching insects you cannot see against a sky that is rapidly going dark. The yard goes quiet for some of your birds at dusk. For others, dusk is a beginning. I want you to think about the night sky over your house on a warm evening in late April or early September. It looks still. You look up and you see stars, maybe a plane, maybe clouds moving across the moon. You do not see anything else. But on the right nights, and the right nights come more often than most people realize, the sky above your house is anything but empty. On peak migration nights in spring and fall, the airspace over a single neighborhood in the eastern United States can see millions of birds moving through in a single night. Not thousands, millions. They are flying at altitudes of 500 to 3,000 feet, navigating by starlight and the Earth's magnetic field, following the pressure systems and wind patterns that their ancestors have used for tens of thousands of years. And they are completely invisible to you from the ground. The species passing over your house on a peak April night read like a list of the birds you will see in your yard over the next 6 weeks. The Baltimore Oriole that will show up at your jelly feeder in May. It is passing over right now. The ruby-throated hummingbird you are going to see at your nectar feeder. The one that just completed a non-stop crossing of hundreds of miles of open water on fat reserves the size of a grape. It came through your airspace before it ever came through your yard. The scarlet tanager, the indigo bunting, the rose-breasted grosbeak, all of them travelers, all of them passing through the dark sky above ordinary neighborhoods on ordinary nights. Cornell Labs' Birdcast system tracks this migration in real time using Doppler weather radar. On peak nights, the radar image of the eastern United States shows what looks from a distance like a weather system, a mass of signal moving northward across the country. It is not weather. It is birds. Enough of them to return a measurable radar signal. Enough of them that early meteorologists had to learn to distinguish the pattern from precipitation. The biological mass of migration is that large. This is happening tonight, above your house, above your quiet yard and your empty feeders, and your sleeping birds tucked into their cavities and their shrubs. It has been happening every spring and every fall for as long as there have been birds and a continent to cross. You have been sleeping under it for years without knowing the full scale of it. The yard goes quiet at dusk. The feeders empty, the branches still. But what you are looking at when you see that quiet yard is not absence. It is concealment, and it is purpose, and it is a level of biological precision that most people never get close enough to notice. The sparrow is in the juniper. The woodpecker is in its roost hole in the dead branch by the alley. The junco is pressed against the base of the shrub, its temperature dropped, its metabolism pulled back to the edge of nothing, waiting for morning with a patience that looks like stillness, but is actually survival. And above the roof, the birds that will fill your yard in May are moving through the dark right now, navigating by light you cannot see, following a map written in their cells, crossing the same sky your neighborhood has always sat under, on their way back. You have been living alongside this your entire life. Now you know what it looks like. Tell me in the comments, have you ever heard singing in the middle of the night from your yard? Or looked up on a fall evening and seen something moving through the sky that you could not quite explain? I read every single comment, and I want to hear what you have noticed. I will see you in the next one.